for sticking around and joining us for this more in-depth discussion on changing plant communities. If you just got that recording box on your screen that said this meeting is being recorded, you can just hit OK, and that should move away from your screen. Again, thanks for being here. My name is Tara Owens, and I am Extension faculty with Hawaii Sea Grant and PI-CASC. And I will be serving as your facilitator for this session on changing plant communities. And we also have Scott Larson there as our tech lead, because it's going to take both of us to work through the machinations of this effort. Scott's screen shows Hawaii Sea Grant as his name, but just know that that's Scott there. Okay, so this discussion session is meant to be sort of an opportunity to provide feedback and share your thoughts and takeaways so far from the summit, and to identify any gaps and needs for science in support of climate change adaptation and specifically changing plant communities, and next steps for PI-CASC and our science partners. And we're going to collect your feedback in a couple of ways. We'll be using online polling through Menti. So in a few minutes, we'll tell you how that will work. And then facilitated discussion as well. But I just want to give you a quick warning. I am not an expert in changing plant communities. I'm a coastal geologist, and I deal a lot with coastal erosion and coastal zone management. So I will be relying on all of you to speak up. In terms of logistics, there's a slide on your screen right now. Hopefully you can see that with some logistical items. Let's see. You can, anything that comes up in the course of this session, type your questions or comments into the chat box. Or you can also raise your hand. Hopefully Scott or I, one or the other, will be able to see you. And you can unmute yourself and speak up. Please don't be afraid, because we want to hear from you. If you can, although I'm not sure you can, there may be the opportunity to rename yourself and make sure that we can see your name and we can call you by your first name. And you might want to even include your location so we know where you're joining us from. If you have that option, it should be, if you click on your little video screen up in the top right corner, there are 3 dots. And you can click on that and it should give you the option to rename.
Yeah, folks have that authority to do it. Should be there for them.
Okay, that might be helpful. Keep your video on too is helpful, so we can see who you are and who's speaking. It makes it a little less distant, even though we are distant. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on those logistics before we jump in to the polling questions? Speak up, speak up. We now have 14 participants. Okay, so in order to move ahead into the polling, what we'll ask you to do, I think it's best if you can do this on your computer screen, but I think it might be better for everybody if you find your phone or other external device. That way you can be looking at the Zoom screen while you're entering your feedback into the Mentimeter. So everybody have a chance to go grab your phones or your iPads, and we're going to ask you to log in to menti.com. So Scott, can you bring up that slide? Excellent. So at the top of this screen, before you read the question, you can just ignore the question for right now. Let's make sure everybody makes their way to menti.com. And the code here at the top, 5264802, is what you want to enter in order to participate in our poll. Again, you can type in chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up if you have any problems.
Nice, we're already rolling, thank you.
Okay, we're having some people rolling. So I hope that means that everybody's able to get in Menti. And our first question, of the day some of you are seeing and responding to. In 1 or 2 words, please share an inspiring or thought-provoking takeaway from the lightning talks on sea level rise and coastal resilience. No, on changing plant communities. Ha ha ha, I'm reading my script, but we're in changing plant communities. So we're seeing plants, drought knowledge, ecosystem services, more long-range planning, increasing awareness, and uncertainty. So we're inspired to do more long-range planning.
With plants, apparently.
With plants? Well, someone who, I don't know much about changing plant communities, but I do work on dune restoration. So a form of ecosystem services on the shoreline. And I definitely know that we're incorporating dune restoration into our, at least our short and interim plans as a way to get us to the next step of long range planning. Okay, let's see. How many responses do we have there, Scott? Did everybody get a chance to respond? Did anybody not manage to get into Menti? Maybe we'll move on to the next question.
Sounds good. We got a dozen already responding, and folks can respond through the discussion. We can move back to different questions.
I'm taking some notes as we go too. Okay, the next question. What enables science to be actionable in your research and or resource management? So actionable science would be doing things like more analysis, projections, or developing decision support tools.
And more unspoken within actionable is taking action, is utilizing it, not just the capacity to take action, but engaging and utilizing the results.
And I guess this question is asking what enables you now, but if it's something that's missing, what would enable you, then that counts too.
Yeah, this is Mary Vaughn. So I helped develop these questions, and I really wanted to be able to have the yin and the yang on this slide, because I was like, okay, well, let's talk about what we're doing that makes it actionable, but let's also talk about the challenges. So if there's something that you think is a challenge, make sure that you note that it's a challenge so that we're not like, oh, good, never talking to each other is making this work. Something like that. Please.
Okay, so I see things like site specific, and I know that's really important in my work because, you know, the idea of having, you know, guidance at some 30,000 foot level that isn't specific to the community or the site isn't often that helpful when we're talking about climate change adaptation. So I agree, site specific, very important. Community buy-in, meeting early and often to identify needs and capacities. Definitely, I find that true in my work too, and that avoids some pitfalls or encounters pitfalls earlier, the earlier the better. These are really good, specific recommendations. That I think goes again to being site specific. Utilize data current to future. Utilize data current to future projected data. Does somebody want to clarify that one? Not sure I understand that, but we're going to have further discussion. So think about that. Collecting good data, strong relationships. I'm taking down some notes so we can talk about these things and report back as well.
Really nice to see no jargon, clear language, because you know any scientific practice has its own linguistics affiliated. The more we can speak with a common language, the more we can develop actionable work that's utilized on the ground.
Absolutely. That's also a good place to always remember to use your friendly extension agents who work in the communities and can help with translation. Strong relationships with managers. Scott, is there any way to scroll down so we can see the ones that are falling off the screen? Yes, you can. All right. Trials and areas that may be better due to climate change soon, but not currently. I'm curious about that one as well. Attention to detail. After addressing major scientific concepts assist or enable managers to conduct practical trials leading to specific prescriptions. So I call that hand-holding, and I see a lot of value in that. And so do the coastal managers. I work very closely with coastal managers. I'm co-located as a partner to a regulatory office at the County of Maui. And, you know, that's, I think, really important to their ability to implement. So I'm just going to call that hand-holding for now. Having flexibility in research to quickly respond to emerging needs. Okay, that's a good one too.
And with these, this question and then those to follow, you can enter multiple answers. So it's great to see the answers coming in when possible. That first one only allowed one response.
Partnerships, critical. Okay, so what we want to do now, and certainly don't stop adding responses if you have something that you really want to add, because we are going to keep these responses and collate them later. What they asked us to do now is take a break before we go into the next couple of questions and spend some time discussing these amongst yourselves. So I've been reading off some of these responses as we go, had a couple of questions, but I'd like to hear from all of you. Was there something in here that you heard from someone else that stood out to you? Oh yeah, that's important to me. And why? Why did it stand out to you? Or is there something in here you'd like to discuss a little bit further? Especially with respect to this topic, changing plant communities. So we can report back to the other topical groups. I know there's somebody out there in this virtual world. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I put down uncertainty because that to me is still an issue with people being able to take action. It's one of those things that people are just, I've heard often people say, well, we just need to resolve that uncertainty so we can figure out what to do. Or give me a better model that tells me what the future will be so that I can figure out what to do. And it's very hard to get folks to really embrace the need to scenario plan and cover more than one, because it's difficult. We have limited time, limited space, only a few individuals of a species, for instance, or only one or two places to actually work. And to the idea of scenarios and hedging your bets and doing two different things is just really difficult for people to even to think about and to operationalize. And so that seems to me an issue that isn't going away, but we don't have a good way to deal with it.
So would you say that we need to somehow help people get comfortable with uncertainty?
Well, it's less comfort than actual tools to deal with it that are effective to help people plan through that problem, because it's a problem that's not going away. So I think
right.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, on the talk that I gave, I didn't really have time to go into much details about that, but I had a bullet point about helping the prioritization of actions in the shifting climate. And I think it's precisely about that, which is, you know, doing this kind of work, interacting with managers for the last, 10 years in Hawaii. No matter how great science you have in terms of climate change impacts, at the end, we almost always get that question, okay, well, so how do I now balance what you told me with the fact that if I don't spend money on fencing this year, the big pigs are gonna come in and they're gonna eat all the plants. And we can't really indefinitely grow the pot of funds. So anyway, so there's always that tension between, critical present needs and impacts that sometimes, they're already emerging now, but they're not perhaps as, urgent as a lot of existing challenges. So, so that's the thing. I feel like here in Hawaii, there's always been a conservative approach to management. People do fencing, people do certain action. They have been doing those for a long time. And we kind of have to start helping people prioritize or start thinking of perhaps a broader set of actions that will steer them towards a more climate resilient suite of tools. And it's very hard to come up with that. It's a very tough balancing act.
Yeah. So if we think of opportunities, of all this in terms of opportunities and solutions, or challenges and opportunities, I guess, challenges and opportunities, uncertainty is a big challenge with respect to climate change. But some of the opportunities are to help with scenario planning. So if we can't reduce the uncertainty, we can navigate through the uncertainty. And I think what you were just saying there, Lucas, was that we could prioritize actions to help, also work through some of those uncertainties. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add about?
Tara, this is Fern. I was just going to add that you asked about the question of where I said trials where we think things will change. And I was thinking, I guess, along coastal lines, if we think salinity is going to go up and freshwater presence is going to go down, that the trials should be made with more saline resistant or saline withstanding vegetation and things like that. And we should do experimentation with what we expect will be the outcome in order to not have to deal with it once it's here, but rather understand what the options are moving towards it.
Gotcha. Thank you, Fern. I just happen to know that we have a UH botanist who's working with me on a project on the North Shore of Maui, and she's doing both lab and field-based research on exactly that, the salinity tolerance of coastal plants. Casey Barton is her name. I don't know if you've crossed her paths before. So I will actually pass that message back to her, because I think she's going to do some outreach right in the new year about the research she's been doing on that topic. So good one.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions for the group to think about, and that's, I think managers are doing a lot of things that we all agree they should keep doing. Probably, more than 95% of what's happening is good and should continue. Fire fuel break management and ungulate control and fencing and tree planting. So, for something to really stand out in my mind, I would want to know, what are we not doing that we should be doing? And what are we doing less of that we should be doing more of? And, those kinds of things might really stand out, as opposed to saying, climate is changing and you should all be building fire breaks and planting trees and fencing and doing ungulate removal. It's like, well, yes, we are. But, what needs to change? I heard Lucas say that a lot of natural resource management has been conservative. So if that's the case, then what can we do to change that and take things to the next level?
And you're giving that from the standpoint of I don't know I don't know everybody here on the call, so I don't know everybody's affiliation. But you're coming at this from the management side or the science side?
Both.
Both.
I work with the Hawaii Division of Forestry and Wildlife as a manager at Puawa State Forest Reserve.
Okay.
And I also teach wildlife biology at UH Hilo and involved in multiple research projects.
So it sounds like, you've heard loud and clear what some of the management options are, and to the degree possible, the state is probably implementing those. But you're asking for what, any other strategies or gaps in the approaches that have been taken.
Yeah, so if there were researchers that stood up and loudly shook their fists and said, look, you're not doing these really important things that you need to be doing, I think managers would hear that. Okay,
that's good to hear. Need researchers to be loud.
Well, I think Lucas brought up two things, not just one. I think Lucas brought up that budgets are limited. So he sees managers continuing to do the short-term imperatives, which are also long-term imperatives, like fencing, and not having time or resources left over to do the other recommendations. So if there is anything that managers are doing that's not necessary, that's where I think people are all ears to hear what that is. But otherwise, I think it's a matter of partly not just prioritizing, but finding more resources. Because we are in both short-term and long-term crises, and our budgets in many cases are less than sufficient for the short-term crises.
Okay, yes. Thank you for clarifying. Again, sort of reiterating the prioritization and then doing the best we can with the resources we have and bringing in more resources if possible.
And if there's any way to be more efficient or to drop doing something that's no longer effective or useful, putting that on the table.
Okay, I hear you. Okay, so I think actually these kind of comments we're getting now are actually segueing nice into the final two questions. So maybe we'll do those questions. I don't want to stop the discussion because it was just getting going. But if we do those final two questions, we can capture your feedback in the Mentimeter, and that way we'll have it documented, and then we'll continue the discussion. So if we can have the third question on the screen, you can go back to your phones. All right. And so this question is, what is the top climate change adaptation research or resource management need that we should be addressing? So you guys were starting to sort of rattle through some of these. So drought just came up, and I know drought came up in the first question as well. Maybe drought came up something earlier as something we've learned, but maybe also something we need to learn and address even further. And resource management needs, this might go back to what we were just hearing as part of the conversation, that need for the researchers to be loud about what we should be doing and maybe what we shouldn't be doing from their perspective. Transferability of lessons learned, rainfall and temperature models at sub-regional scale. Okay, downscaling models is always a challenge. Multi-species management. Oh, lost causes. I really want to talk about that. That's an interesting way to put
I
it.
like that too, and that popped up. That was a great discussion you just had, which is, folks are saying, well, what are we doing that we shouldn't necessarily be putting so much effort into?
Yeah.
I think of some of Elliot's work at Pool of Awa too. They're going, well, we might restore a variety of different plants in this location now, but if climate changes in specific ways in the future, for instance, droughts, et cetera, what should we be working toward? What would be a lost cause in the next 20, 30 years?
Forested ecosystems. How do we design the forests of the future? Extreme events on invaded plant communities. Better precipitation projections. I think that goes back down to downscaling models too, rainfall and such. Okay, before we come back to this and discuss further, we can move on to the next question unless anybody wants to raise their hand and say, I'm not done. All right, fourth and final question. And this is like if we were in the room together and you got your chance to put the dot on one thing. The question is, what are the most important next steps after this science summit? So I believe you only get to vote once here. Is that true? No, each participant can select up to 4 options. So you do get to vote more than once, but you are limited in your votes. So let's read on the screen here. We have more needs assessments and discussion with local stakeholders, co-production workshops with researchers and resource managers, communication of research results to local government, other decision makers, and community, support interdisciplinary research, then going down to the bottom, left to right, long-term and sustained investment in networking with local stakeholders, better collaboration among state and federal partners to build climate change adaptation synergies. I'd say that goes down to local partners too. Long-term networking with local stakeholders, and providing research and management opportunities for students throughout the Pacific to engage around climate change adaptation. Cast your votes.
This is exciting. Question or answer 6 is catching up. It was way behind, and now we've got a battle.
We have a tie. Somebody jump in and make a tiebreaker. This is good. I think probably this question, maybe more than any, can help help Sea Grant and PI-CASC and all our partners think about our pathways forward. I always kind of cringe that it looks like collaboration is winning as a need, and you know, you think you work really hard on collaboration, but it's never enough. I'll give everybody another minute to cast their votes, and then we'll continue with the discussion.
Can you scroll down too to see the whole selection?
But this is every, should be able to see, I'm not sure, can you see all of them?
There are 8 choices. You should be able to see 8 choices on the screen.
Yeah.
3 of them are pretty similar to each other.
Which 3 do you see as being similar?
Well, networking with local stakeholders, sustained investment in networking with local stakeholders, and needs assessment and discussion with local stakeholders.
Okay.
They are kind of different, but I think there's it's splitting the vote. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so that would be number 1, number 5, and number 7.
Sorry, I went past that point on my iPhone.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. I'm not seeing it probably the same way you are.
It looks like 1, 5, and 7, Kara.
1, 5, and 7. So if everyone agreed that those were similar, then we would have 12 votes in the category of more work with local stakeholders. That's what I think you're saying, Katie. Is that correct?
Well, but then the same person could have voted for 2 of those variations, so it's kind of hard to tell. We could take a vote by hand. How many people do think it's important to network, assess needs, and discuss with local stakeholders?
Well, and the one that actually got the most votes quantitatively is better collaboration among state and federal partners. But I would have said that we should have included local partners there too, which then could be kind of part of the same category. Of course, I didn't develop these questions, so I don't know exactly what the thought process was.
Can I share? So I was part of helping develop these. And so what we were trying to do with these questions, and I agree, clearly we had like 14 questions and they got edited down, and clearly long-term sustained investment with local stakeholders and long-term networking with we did a bad job editing with those 2. Those are clearly very, very, very similar. But what we were trying to do with this was identify like what kind of next steps, because PI-CASC tried to coordinate this meeting to bring together partners that we could work with that ran in slightly different lanes, so we could identify how we could best put our resources towards moving this forward. And then also to identify, you know, if there are opportunities that we could move forward then with the local stakeholders and or with lower levels of government. So it was trying to sort of capture what was the most important. Like, is it most important for PI-CASC to be talking to Sea Grant? I don't think that's the most important thing, but you may think it's the most important thing. I think it's really important for us to be sitting down with partners in Palau that are saving local cultural and heritage sites. I mean, so that's sort of why they have we didn't lump local and federal and state all together. So to try to get a breakdown on that.
Okay. And yet, so there were high votes on both, basically more coordination with state and federal and more coordination with local. So now I think Mary Vaughn's asking for us to think about specific manifestations of that.
Can I add one more thing? If there was something that you guys thought was missing from this list, Minty doesn't really offer that, like choose one of these 8 or add another. So if there's something that you're like, this is what you guys should be discussing and you missed the fall entirely, please also bring that up now.
Let's get down into the weeds now too.
Yeah, I'm sort of feeling like I was hoping for more actionable sort of items. I feel like, while a lot of these are very important, I don't know exactly what they mean. And I would like to see more on the ground actions or sort of more concrete. And this is what I think as a manager, it can be frustrating. You just, I mean, we're just sort of like, tell us what to do. So I think, some of that would be what Lucas was talking about in his talk yesterday about identifying these novel conservation actions, or finding more resources and capacity, and having more pilot projects. And so when I looked at forget which one I picked now, I don't know if you can go back, but I was trying to pick one where it looked like more working together, because maybe that was an opportunity for managers and researchers to, start working on a management action and then kind of be involved in this feedback sort of arrangement where you keep adapting, as you get more information. So yeah, I didn't quite see the most important next step in this list for me. And I'm also the one who wrote about the lost causes.
Oh, Colleen, then I want to go back to lost causes, because what did you mean about that? Were you talking about, back to our previous conversations about getting more guidance about what the lost causes are? Stop doing these things because it's not a good priority, or did you have some other thing in mind?
A little bit. It was sort of a dramatic way of saying what Elliot was saying, which was, are there things that we're not really going to make that much headway in, and we shouldn't be focusing so much of our energies that way? I've seen some of Lucas Fortini's maps on sort of how the weed distributions are going to change over time. And maybe we need to move out of some of these areas that are just going to become invaded. So, I think sometimes in conservation, we hate to give up on anything, but funding is tight. We don't have a lot of room to be creative or novel as managers. We can't take those kind of risks. So we could possibly free up some resources and funding if, not to be a pessimist, but if we're not going to get anywhere on certain fronts. So if you're constantly working in a fire-prone area, I don't know. I'm sure everybody has their own places they want to protect and not give up on, but it's just an opportunity to reprioritize.
This is Steve Miller with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We deal with this issue all the time. We have 100 plants with less than 50 individuals left in the wild. Do we invest in them, or should we just write them off and say, we can't deal with everything, so those 50, pretty low probability of recovery, let them go? We really can't do that. The law doesn't really permit that kind of approach, but those are issues of triage that come up constantly, and you get a whole range of perspectives on it. Some saying, yeah, go ahead and do the triage. Others saying, no, you can't do that. You got to deal with everything.
Well, that is certainly an interesting topic I hadn't thought would come up.
And my take on that and what Steve was saying is that for some species where that's the case, there may need to be more review to have things that are going to be maintained ex situ until there's a potential to put them back out into the environment, and that those species that are really rare, that aren't out there, that can't be managed out there, can be managed ex situ so that the species is not lost until management is possible.
Yeah, we do all of the above. We manage it whenever we can, and that's what we end up doing, and that's okay. But I think the adaptation question is, adaptation is what people do. Plants and animals out in the wild, they don't undergo this notion of adaptation. They survive as best they can in the conditions they are presented with. And the notion of adaptation in their context is one that is sort of evolutionary through natural selection. So when we talk about adaptation, we're talking about what are we going to have people do? And before you start telling people what to do, you've got to talk to them and get their buy-in and find out what their perspectives are. And I think that's why the partnership and the partnering all come in, constantly come into play, because people that have been dealing with natural resource conservation for many, many years have inevitably run into the problem where they go, oh, this is what you need to do. And everybody, all the the community is going, no, wait a minute. We hadn't had any input into that. We want to have say in what goes on in our community and affects our natural resources. So you need to talk to those people, really find out what their perspectives are, and see how you can integrate the activities that you think need to be done to protect the natural resources in with the activities that they think are important, and blend that together in some sort of program of adaptation.
So Stephen, that is really interesting what you just said there. Maybe this is something that's common knowledge to the plant people of the world, but I thought it was interesting what you said about adaptation is what people do, not what the plants do. And so that's a people construct. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Is Jeff Burgett still there? He could tell you about this quite a bit. I think that, that's a big theme that he has dealt with over the years and in his current position. And, that's what, what is it? Is that right, Jeff?
I'm sorry, I'm on another call. I got called another call, so I have to defer to you, Steve. Take it away, man.
Well,
Yeah,
so
anyway.
we are actually going to be wrapping up in the next few minutes. So I just wanted to give you the couple minute warning here that I want to hear from anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak up, or just, still waters run deep. So I know the ones of you there who are quiet are probably thinking.
One quick comment on that 9, the better collaboration among state and federal partners, and maybe the reason that's ranked so high is a number of folks in this group feel that the collaboration isn't as strong as it could be. And I guess I'm just wondering what PI-CASC's role might be in that one to help move that forward.
Okay, good question. I will definitely note that one down as something we go into we're going to go back to the larger group after this, and we'll have the chance to report out. And I guess that duty falls on me. So I'm going to try to distill down some of the things that you reported in your polling questions, and then some of these really interesting points that were brought forward. So, you guys can also chime in when we go through that process, but I heard some things, I think I will frame it up in terms of the challenges and opportunities. And early on, we were talking about uncertainty and how to help our managers deal with uncertainty through scenario planning and prioritization. We heard the question about what are we not doing that we should be doing? And so if researchers who are out there, maybe in their offices, doing a lot of really good work that we don't know about, we need them to be loud and to help us understand new strategies, or what strategies we may be doing that really aren't that helpful anymore in this current climate context. There's always a need for more actionable items. So that I think the examples we're given are just, again, new conservation actions, or where we can do pilot projects to test out some of these strategies and learn through failure. And we heard about trying to identify the lost causes, maybe discontinuing to do some of the things we've always done in the past. that might not continue to bear fruit or that are diverting our resources. We heard that collaboration both up the chain, the state and federal, and down to local communities are always needed, more needed, and that is something that PI-CASC could probably help with. Did I miss something, or?
I really like, Elliot, that last point. That's a great one to put back at PI-CASC. And as you pretty well know, Manager Climate Corps, at least that portion of PI-CASC, we're doing our best to search out long-term existing networks of both community associations, manager networks, natural and cultural resource managers, and researchers, and pool them. And I think that there's going to be more and more of that coming. Really great question. Thank you. And really want to say mahalo to Tara for guiding us today, and really appreciate the opportunity to listen to everybody today. Mahalo.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being willing to speak up. I know it's hard in the virtual world. It's not the same. And thanks, Scott, for being our tech lead, because I don't think I could have figured all that out on my own.
I'm no techie, but I did it. I even got a picture of everybody. So yeah, we still have a couple minutes, because I think you said, Tara, the update is now 3:45 when we transition. So
I think that's what they said. Yeah, so I'm going to be preparing my report out. So if there's anything that I didn't say in that quick summary there, please speak up again.
And I believe we are going to send report outs to all attendees. So I think there will be a later email that goes out to folks, and hopefully that will include your survey answers, as well as some of the notes that Tara and I have been taking.
Maybe if we have a couple of minutes, just one thing that an idea that I've been throwing around in my own head is we all often have these kind of symposiums where managers are given the opportunity to get to know science better, like, HCC and things like that. But we rarely have the opportunities where the scientists have the opportunity to understand management and decision making better. And I feel like some of the most valuable days I have had in my job are days that I took the time to go, like the DLNR state botanists up the Koalau Mountains to see actually what they do when they're like monitoring rare plant populations, and when they're going through like outplant and weeding efforts and so forth, and understanding what is the decision making, like how come they are working on this population and so forth, all the constraints that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And I feel like those really helped me as a scientist to understand what is the decision landscape that they have to deal, the limitations, and also creating those really strong connections. So when, that said botanist has an issue, they can call it straight to me, and, we have that strong connection to be able to tackle, issues together. So I think that's just something that we could do better.
Yeah, so the scientists need to get out with the managers. And I will tell you what's hard about that, as being somebody who works with coastal managers, is that they are just overwhelmed all of the time. So they don't even have time to stop and think about coordination. So I don't know how to facilitate that, but that is a really good point.
And it's fun too.
It's fun. Yes, it is fun. I mean, is that something scientists take on themselves, and independently reach out to the, to the relevant managers in their worlds? Or, sometimes scientists are shy and a little hesitant to do that. Or do we, PI-CASC, Sea Grant, find ways to be better, better at connecting? It goes back again to that, our high votes for more collaboration. It's just a different way of framing it. So I appreciate that comment.
It also goes to Miwa and Christian's talk earlier of diverse knowledge systems. A lot of what it comes down to is building personal relationships. And the more we can support that, it is, as Lucas says, fun. And that's no small thing in driving actions, engaging diverse knowledge forms that are innate within any real strong existing network or relationship.
Yeah, I think you got to build the relationships for sure. That's absolutely fundamental. But you got to work on their projects, not your project. You got to say, what do you want to do? And they will tell you what they want, that they need to be done. And you say, okay, how can I help you get that done? You know, or at best you say, well, I can do this part for you, and that becomes your project. So it's, you know, we don't, you know, typically researchers, they don't do that. They figure out their project, and then they go out there and say, hey, I got this really cool project. I want to do it here, you know, it'll help you out, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, and they're kind of going, I don't know, what are you talking about? So I think you need to turn the system on its head. And let them define the project. USGS needs to say, okay, researchers, here's this money, you know, go out to your, you know, the people in the field, the managers, and find out what they want done, then come back and write a little proposal for doing what they want done. And we'll use our money to get that done, you know, and you'll build relationships and trust. And who knows, maybe a few years down the road, you can go to them and say, you know, I think you could really improve this if you did these kind of things. But it's going to take years of relationships to do it. And if you're only around for 2 or 3 years, forget it. You're done. You know, 10 years, yeah, okay, that'll work. You know, it takes that much time to really make it happen. So, you know, it's a career.
Good point. Yeah.
Tara, I think we need to get rolling here. I don't want to pull from the plan. That's a fantastic point, and I think the very nature of co-production, as PIs are no longer considered strictly researchers, but can be managers as well, and community leads. I think that's a fantastic point to end on.
Agreed. So what you're going to